Hi again, class. We have been talking about the social self in the third week, and we're going to continue, pick up on where we left off. We talked about, I introduced the idea of situationism, which is the idea that our social self changes depending on the context or the situation that we're in. And working self concept is part of situationism, and here it's defined as the subset of self-knowledge that is brought to mind in a particular context. So the idea here is that if I were to ask you about yourself, you would probably, depending on the situation that you're in or the context that you're in, the role that you're playing at that particular time, you would probably be more conscious of and likely to share with me the self that you're aware of that relates to the context that you're in. So if I asked you right now something about yourself, since you're listening to my lecture, you're likely, one of the first things probably in your consciousness is that you're a student. If you are at a holiday dinner with your family, you're probably more aware of yourself as it relates to the people that you're with. So you might be more aware of yourself as a son or a daughter or a parent, depending on your relationship with the people. And another another concept that relates to situationism is distinctiveness. So distinctiveness is that your awareness of yourself might be affected, and this also pulls in working self-concept and basic situationism, because you are aware of your differences from other people in the situation. So for instance, if you're maybe the youngest person in the room, you might notice that, you might be aware of that, or if you're the youngest person in the room, if you're of a different ethnicity, even gender can play into distinctiveness, the phenomenon of distinctiveness, so that you're taking a math class and you're the only woman, or you're going to a yoga class and there's 2 men and there's 12 women. You might be more aware of that. So that's distinctiveness. And then the next thing we're going to be talking about, which is really a big one, this is a kind of a big concept here, is the role that culture can play in our social self. And we're going to be looking at independent versus interdependent views. An independent view of self draws from our Western culture's emphasis on individualism, so that a person would see themselves as distinct, autonomous, and separate from other people, and defined by their individual traits, their uniqueness, and their preferences. With the independent view of self, there's a stress on the power of individual effort. And this self-control encourages kind of a more inward focus on the self, rather than an outward focus. So independent, the independent social self, think of that. Another synonym for independent is individualistic. You may have heard in other classes, that's a term that's used often. Same thing. So I'm going to give you some examples of some common adages that reflect a more independent view of the self. So if I were to say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, what does that mean? It means speak up, be persistent, keep trying, make it happen, kind of thing. That really reflects an emphasis on autonomy, being able to get the job done yourself, and to keep trying. So another adage is, if you got it, flaunt it. Okay, another adage that really reflects an attitude of encouraging people to be independent, to stand up for themselves, to make the best of their own strengths and attributes. So the emphasis with the independent view is really on independence, individualism, and freedom. Now we're going to have a look at the interdependent view of self. Now the interdependent view is really synonymous with collectivism. Okay, so you might have heard in other classes, other readings, that term, and they really mean the same kind of thing when it comes to culture. So from an interdependent view, the self is seen as not as an island, but as connected to other people, defined by what their social roles, their social duties are, the shared traits of their group, and the shared preferences of their group. And it stresses, in contrast to stressing individualism, it stresses the power of the group, the power of communal efforts. The interdependent self-construal is more of an outward focus on what the situation is rather than independent situations and powers. Oh, so let's do our adages that reflect an interdependent view of self. So one that I have is, and these are Asian adages, so you may not have heard them, but they're interesting. The empty wagon makes the most noise. The empty wagon makes the most noise. What do you get from that? That really stresses the power of power of collectivism, of doing things together. The group has more power than the individual themselves, and you're going to the noise part. I think is you won't be shaking things up as much if you work together, pull together. The next adage that I have is the nail that stands up is pounded down. Okay, really runs contrary to some of our more Western independent thought processes for sure. So the idea here is like, don't stand out because you might get in trouble if you stand out. So very contrasting sense of self. And really the whole idea of self, I think, is interesting when we talk about collectivist or independent cultures, because oftentimes they don't really have the same sense of what that word means, what self means, as we do, because they're so collectivist. So where are these different views more prominent? We've talked about it before, but the independent view is more prominent in America, Canada, and Western European countries. And then the interdependent or collectivist views of self are much more prominent in East Asian, South Asian, the Mediterranean, Latin America, and African cultures. And there's some interesting things in your book about different African cultures and how there are contrasts there now that there is becoming more development there. So you can read about that as well. Here is a little chart that kind of gives you a good contrast between a visual between what relationships are like depending on whether or not you have an independent self view or an interdependent self view. So on the left here you have a view of the self, and then you have the people related to the person that you can see barely connect really with the self, and some of them don't connect at all, like a friend or a co-worker. There's not much of a connection there. Here's a closer friend here, or a couple of closer friends, so that the independent self is much more stressed, and the separateness of others in the person's life. The interdependent view over here, we see that the self and others really interface. It's not that they overlap completely, but that others become actually part of, really, the person's sense of self. Kind of an interesting, and when we look at these, it's not always just a matter of culture as far as where you grew up on the globe, but also just how you were socialized. So we see that overall, generally, women tend to have a little bit more overlap than men do with their self-construal. And I think your book talks about that as well. This is an interesting frame, and it shows some images that were shown in a study. They were shown to Japanese participants, and then they were also shown to Westerners. And they were just asked to describe what they saw. And the Japanese participants were more likely to take the expressions of the whole group into consideration when they judged a situation. So they looked at the whole context, whereas the Westerners were more focused on the individual that's in the foreground. So they were more influenced by this person here who's smiling and didn't consider what's going on in the background here, and they were more focused on the person in the foreground here and didn't seem to notice the contrasting expressions here. So that's kind of an interesting one as well. Here is one more example that contrasts the independent self-construal with the interdependent self-construal. So this was a study where they looked at brain imaging of people as they were considering whether certain traits applied to them or not. So there's a certain part of the brain that is activated when this happens. So it's called the medial prefrontal cortex is activated, lights up with activity when they're considering whether or not a particular trait relates to them. And that was in both groups that they used for the study. They used a Chinese group and they used a Western European group. And they wanted to see if there's any differences. The medial prefrontal cortex lit up in both groups when they considered whether or not a trait applied to them or not. But what was interesting is that then all of the participants were asked to consider whether a certain trait related to their mother or not. And there was a difference when they, a cultural difference when they looked at this. So this same area, the medial prefrontal cortex, was activated when the Chinese group was considering whether or not a trait related to their mother, the same way that it lit up when they were considering themselves. However, the Western group, the Western European group, showed no activation in that region at all. So there's a separate part of the brain that was activated when they were considering, a completely separate part, considering whether or not their mother had that trait or not. So what this tells us is that really the same regions of the brain represent the self and the mother if you're brought up and have embraced the interdependent kind of self-control, whereas you've got totally separate regions. There's no overlap if you have the more independent self-control, much more separate. So I see we're running down on time right now, and this is a good place to stop. So we will pick up next time looking at social comparison and self-esteem, social acceptance. So we will stop for now.